When I was younger, I remember trying to find so many movies and TV shows involving lesbian characters growing up, and all I can really recall are sad endings. So much so that even until this day, I always skip to the last part of a sapphic movie to see how it's gonna end first. Now, there were some cheesy bright spots, I'll admit, such as Debs or Imagine Me and You, but those were rare finds at the time. But no matter how far I look back, for as many happy endings as I could find, there were more endings involving death, abuse, rejection, or really anything like that just around the corner. Now, the most prominent of these would be the Bury Your Gays Trope, or the BYG trope, as I will be calling it in this video. And by far the weirdest argument that I've ever heard defending this trope is that, well, lesbians die too. And to be honest, we are all extremely aware of this. The problem isn't that we don't want different stories being told, it's just that a lot of the times we are only getting one type of ending. And it's one type of ending for stories that aren't even told that often regardless. Now, in most recent years, the most prominent example of this would be Lexa from The 100. And I'm pretty sure it's called The 100, I don't think it's The 100, and if that's wrong, then it's wrong. But I will be 100% honest when I say that I've never actually watched this show, and I know that seems kind of crazy that I'm going to talk about it real quick, even though I've never seen it. But what I will say is that I have seen a compilation of all the Clark and Lexa scenes on YouTube, and that's really about it. If there's something I do recall, it's the backlash that this caused within the community. Now, community is a broad word, I know. I'm talking about the lesbian community, if that's not clear by now. And I think this happened because it was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was this extremely badass lesbian character that had her own storyline and her own personality outside of just being gay. And it really showed that, in this case, a lesbian character didn't have to be tied to their sexual orientation for a good story to be written about them. Now, I know all of this sounds hypocritical and really counterintuitive to say, well, her sexuality was removed from the equation, and then to go on and say, but they killed yet another lesbian character. But if there's something we have to understand is that to a community of people, and especially to a community that is generally very underrepresented, and in this case the lesbian community, the sexual orientation of a character is never going to be fully taken away from their mind. You know, nowadays when a lesbian character dies, we kind of just shake our head and we have an attitude of, well, there goes another one, which I don't think is entirely fair, not only to us, but to the writers. I would even argue that the trope would be fine, but it's a matter of how it happens. Far too often it happens when any type of solace is finally found and then boom, you gotta tear it all down. I do think there are some stories where it's justified and makes narrative sense. For example, The Haunting of Bly Manor or Person of Interest. But I would also say that there's an argument to be made that why are we narratively always coming to this conclusion? You know, like, why so frequently? What the heck? So I do think this take would be more justified if the frequency of the BYG trope wasn't so high in all media. Like, dang, just give us some more lighthearted media or happy endings before jumping to tragedy and sadness all the time, you know? But I digress. One of the older but still pretty modern examples I can look back to is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, in this show, a character by the name of Tara McClay died by a bullet that wasn't meant for her. And while we won't talk about the trajectory and the physics of how the shot hit in the first place, this is a show dealing with mythical beings, I'm not going to be that picky. It is wild that the character handed this death was Tara, a lesbian whom just made up with her girlfriend. Now, I don't think this decision was made with any malice in mind, but this is not the only example we'll find. There's a whole list out there spanning decades, and while each of them had their own storylines, or lack thereof, a lot of them ended the same way.
Okay, get in.
And I can honestly even say that Tara's storyline was necessary. Like I said, we can make this argument if we wanted to, that it was necessary to further the plot. Do I think it's unfortunate? Yes, but do I think that it also helped progress Willow's character arc, whether you liked it or not? Also, yes. But the situation, I feel, is more of a matter of the fact that lesbians don't get a lot of representation in the media to begin with, and the ones we do get tend to get ripped away from us. Going back to The 100 and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's interesting to note that both Tara and Lexa died taking a bullet that wasn't even meant for them. Wow, what a coincidence that is, huh? Also, for both of them, their death happened right after they made up with their significant other, which is, to be honest, not a very good look. Now, maybe I'm being optimistic, but I will say that media and television is at least trying when it comes to this. There was an obvious shift after Lexa and the backlash that caused, and I don't think it'll ever be perfect, but I don't think it's crazy to want better. I'm going a little off topic here, and maybe I'll make a separate video about this, but I haven't used the term good representation because I really hate what that implies. I don't think a character has to be a cookie cutter goody two-shoes to be accepted as good representation. In my personal opinion, I like my characters a little bit messy sometimes. All of this is not to say that there are absolutely no movies or TV shows with good endings for lesbians, but that we'd like to see a little bit more before writers keep throwing us 6 feet under. Now, I don't want this whole thing to sound negative because, as I've stated before, there have been movies that don't fall under this trope, and I'll just throw some recommendations here just for the sake of it. I mentioned before Imagine Me and You, Debs. I'm gonna mention Arcane that hasn't finished yet, but I'm just gonna throw it out here right now. Amara Muerte and Fear Street. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Anything like that. Or we can just talk about our favorite sapphic media, any kind of video games, movies, TV shows, books, anything like that could be an interesting conversation too. Now, if this video interested you in any type of way, wait till you hear what I have to say about Crush.